Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
There's something wrong. There's something wrong. You don't know what it is. You don't know what it's there. Like a splinter, driving you mad.
Bring the ship up to broadcast depth. We're going in. Taking Neo to see her.
See who? The Oracle.
Welcome aboard, everybody. We're happy you could join us for what we hope to be another round of insightful discussion. I'm James Sangster, founder of Houston Ghost Research. HGR is a spiritual crisis intervention and paranormal investigation group in Houston. I'm also the author of Help, I'm Haunted, Dealing with Ghosts, available on Amazon Kindle. We're also joined by Keith Davis, our co-host and fellow intellectual and seeker of truth. Our sponsor for today is Blue Rose Alchemy. I've got tons of links and research for alchemy and Ormus and stone medicine and all sorts of the cool stuff we're involved in over at bluerosealchemy.com. Definitely go check that out. And I want to give a shout out to everybody who has dropped me a line on Ormus. Got tons of letters, tons of folks reaching out and talking to me and sharing their experiences. Awesome to see that. Awesome to hear that. For the many folks who have asked me about making your own Ormus, I now have a very detailed article up on bluerosealchemy.com on make your own Ormus. All my notes, all my how-tos, the stuff you really need to know to get started, and even the equipment and reviews and stuff like that. Definitely go check that out. I also put up a video where I explain all this stuff in video format. I don't actually make a batch, but I'm sitting there talking about it. So go check that out over at bluerosealchemy.com. So we're really excited. We had a 3-hour interview last night. I'm recording this after the fact. We had a 3-hour interview with Brad Little Frog Hudson. He prefers to be called Little Frog. He's a shamanic healer, ordained minister, and best-selling author on Amazon.com. His primary focus areas are shamanic extraction healing, which we talk about in the interview, death and dying counseling, teaching and depossession of people and places. He's got a different take on exorcism. He calls it depossession. He's also the author of The Truth About You, Who You Are and Why You're Here on Earth. I've actually read that book. Great book. Very short, very brief, very conversational. Packs a lot of wisdom into just a couple of pages. And man, I honestly couldn't sum up my own spiritual beliefs any more concisely than what he did in that book. It's excellent. The Truth About You, Who You Are, and Why You're Here on Earth. His other two books I have not had a chance to read yet. They are Shamanic, Depossession, and Other True Healing Miracles. It's stuff and stories from his work and his practice as a shaman. And the last book we actually talk a little bit about in the interview, Vision Quests, True Stories from the Wilderness, is about sort of his coming of age as a shaman and his vision quests when he got started in shamanism. We do talk about each one of the books a little bit in turn, and I have to say I have glanced over the other two. They're all very short. They're very easy to digest, easy reads. He's got a very conversational and approachable tone. I really dig that. Finally, Brad has an important message he's going to talk about toward the end of the interview about autism he'd like to share with the world. He discusses it at great length. You can find more information about autism and his information that he's sharing on littlefroghealing.com/autism. Links to his website and his books are going to be in the show notes, both directly to his books and to his Amazon Kindle versions. So definitely go check that out. There's also a link to one of the vendors he talks about who sells a flower essence that he recommends using. The website for them is greenfarmessences.com, and there's a link to that in the show notes. So with that, we're going to jump right into the conversation, and want to really give a shout out to Brad. Thank you for your time. Really enjoyed the conversation, and we're definitely going to have you on board for another episode because there's lots more to talk about. And here we go. Just to sort of jump into it here, Brad, can you give us a rundown just from a layman's perspective, somebody who's never heard about this stuff, who's never been involved with any of this stuff? Can you give us sort of a rundown in your own words of what is shamanism in general, and then how did you get involved in it?
Sure. Shamanism is a spiritual practice that's been around for 50,000 years. The origins of shamanism are Siberia, but what I find fascinating is there are certain core elements of shamanism that are the same no matter where you go in the world. Primitive man, as far as we know, did not have easy mobility back then. So when you look at shamanic practices in South America, North America, and say Asia, for instance, 40,000 years ago, they had many elements that were similar. The purpose of shamanism is to create balance between the spirit world and our physical incarnation. The shaman works with helping spirits in order to help the tribe. Just think of the medicine man in the Native American tradition. The shaman was responsible for the health of everyone. So he wore many hats. He was part doctor. He worked with herbs. He would find the food source when it would leave. He would consult the spirits and find out what direction to take the tribe in, and they would pack up and move in that direction. The shaman would take care of droughts, ask the weather spirits to bring rain. The shaman also took care of the tribes people's afterlife. When somebody was ready to die, he would perform the ceremonies to ensure that person's soul had a safe journey to its home. So he was a man of many, many talents, but it all revolves around the helping spirits. In the shamanic worldview, the view of the universe, there are three worlds. We live in what's called the middle world. This is where all the bad stuff happens. This is physical incarnation, and this is where we encounter all of the negative stuff of our day-to-day life. Then there is the lower world, which is a realm of non-ordinary reality. It's pure compassion, and it's inhabited by compassionate helping spirits in the form of animals. Absolutely nothing can harm you in the lower world. There is also an upper world. That is another realm of non-ordinary reality that is populated by compassionate helping spirits in the form of human teachers. Again, nothing can harm you up there. So the shaman will travel through in a dream state, which is created by a drum beat of around 200 beats per minute, puts your brain in a theta state, and that's a dream state. You and I talking right now, our brains are in an alpha state. When we start to fall asleep, our brains go into a beta state. When we dream, we're in a theta state. So that's the journey, the shamanic journey state. And then, of course, when we're in very, very deep sleep, that's called a delta state. But we're concerned with the theta state. The drumming allows us to leave our bodies, do astral traveling, go to either the lower or upper world, consult our helping spirits, and then return to the middle world with answers about whatever question it was, or whether it was healing or whatnot. I want to emphasize, too, that the lower and upper worlds have nothing to do with heaven and hell. That's a real recent human invention. and didn't exist 50,000 years ago. So again, these lower and upper worlds are realms of pure compassion with helping spirits. And these spirits are, in addition to the guides and angels that are assigned to each one of us. I became involved in shamanism very recently, 5 years ago. My mother passed of pancreatic cancer. I went into a very deep black place. I was always kind of spiritual. I lived my life according to the laws of karma. But after my mother passed, I was convinced that when you died, it was like the end of the last episode of The Sopranos when the screen went black. That there's just nothing else after that. And I was convinced of that. It took me hiring a young man from Los Angeles to work for my company, which was located in Dover, New Hampshire. It took him giving me a book when he arrived to start his job called Calls to Mystic Alice, which is a book written by a California medium. I read that and I recognized just about everything that she talked about in there that had happened to me. And that gave me a glimmer of hope that there is something else when we die. I was then almost immediately led to the website of a Native American medium on Cape Cod, because I live right outside of Boston. I visited her. A 1-hour session turned into 3.5 hours, and I left there with an armful of books that were exactly what I needed. The divine was certainly looking out for me. I read those books. I started mediumship development classes, but where everyone else was channeling people, I was only able to channel animals. So I would sit there, everybody would say, oh, I've got somebody's grandfather, I've got somebody's uncle, and I'd say, I've got somebody's ferret. And that was always good for a laugh. So I went from there. I was led on my laptop to the website of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, and it turned out that weekend they were having a basic workshop here in Massachusetts. I immediately signed up for it. I attended it, and at the end, when I thanked the instructors, I said, guys, don't take this personally, but you weren't really teaching me anything. I was remembering all this stuff. And that's how my journey has been ever since. It's been a journey of remembrance. It's been a fascinating roller coaster of events. Spirit told me that I was on the fast track, and Spirit was absolutely right about that. The company that I started 20 years ago, I walked away from in January 2014 so that I could pursue my healing and teaching practice full time, because I knew I had to be of service to people 24/7 at that point. Fortunately, my business partners accommodated me. I left on very good terms, and that kind of puts me to where I am today.
Well, along that path, how did you get the nickname or the name Little Frog? Where did that come from exactly?
Little Frog came from my very first vision quest in the Green Mountain National Forest of Vermont in October of 2012. I went out there for a 4-day, 4-night solo fast, just me in a sleeping bag and a water filtration device, no food. And when I left my base camp to begin the quest, it was a little before sunrise. I had a good hour's hike to my power spot, and all I saw along the way were these tiny little frogs. The Green Mountain National Forest is renowned for its diversity of wildlife, and for 4 days and 4 nights I saw nothing but tiny frogs, nothing else. And then I heard the voice in my head that when you hear it, you know it immediately, and it said, your medicine name is Little Frog. Now, I'm 6 foot tall, 275 pounds, and I look more like a linebacker for the New England Patriots than a tiny little frog. So I immediately looked up in the sky and I went, "Really? That you guys couldn't have come up with a better name than that?" I was expecting something like Soaring Eagle or Running Bear, Charging Buffalo, something maybe a little more macho.
Right.
But it goes to show Spirit's sense of humor. Because Little Frog really made me think. And when I woke up the morning of the fifth day to come back home, there was a huge frog sitting about 6 inches from my eyes when I opened my eyes. And I heard in my head, "Well, Little Frog, you made it. You completed your quest. Are you now Big Frog?" And I thought about that, and I said, "No." I said, I'll never be Big Frog. I will always be Little Frog because I'm always going to be learning, and I'll never be able to learn everything. And that was a terrific moment for me.
So the first time you heard that voice, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I've experienced that myself. What was your reaction? I mean, were you surprised, or did you think you had a hitchhiker or somebody who had followed you where you were going, or what was your emotional reaction to that?
Well, I actually heard it the day before when I was searching for my power spot. My base camp was on a lake, a gorgeous, gorgeous, huge lake. And I saw about a mile from the shore where my base camp was a beautiful peninsula with a nice little beach and huge maple trees. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's where I want to spend my vision quest. And once I got close to that spot, I probably spent 3 hours trying to get to it. And I was thwarted every single time, whether it was quicksand or swamp or impenetrable bushes. I couldn't get to it. And I stopped at one point and I just yelled at the top of my lungs, "Why can't I get there?" And that was when I heard the voice the first time and said, "This is not a vacation." And I went, "Oh my." I immediately turned around and started retracing my steps back to base camp. And I did find my power spot. I walked by it 3 times. And each time I walked by it, I knew I should stop. But I wasn't heeding the voice in my head as much as I should have. But I eventually found my proper power spot for the next 4 days. But that was quite an experience. Hearing that, and I was being reprimanded for trying to turn something very serious into a luxury vacation.
Yeah, I can identify with that. First time I ever heard that voice, I was probably 10 or 11, and I was having one of those existential moments you have when I had when I was about that age. I don't know if other people have it. And I was just laying in my bed in my room going, "Is God real?" And I just asked that over and over and over in my head. And finally I said, if I really want to know the answer, I should probably just ask out loud. So I asked out loud, and I was the only person home. And this booming voice came from my hallway and answered. And it just a simple one-word answer was all it took, was this booming yes. And I kind of went, "Oh, okay." And my rear end puckered up to about the size of a dime, and I kind of went, maybe I should look through the house and see what's going on. And there was nobody there, absolutely nobody there. And it sounded like it came from, like a 10-foot tall giant. And I kind of went, wow, I think I just had my first serious spiritual experience.
I love that.
Yeah. So that, to the heart of ask and, you'll receive eventually at some point. So, you were talking about hitting the theta state, and you'd mentioned drumming. And how do you know you're in that theta state, and what other tools and techniques can you use to get into that theta state?
That's a good question. How do you know that you're in that state? I teach shamanic journeying various levels of it. Most of my students have no experience with shamanism at all. So it's a challenge to get some of these people into that theta state, especially people who are very left-brained. The people I have the most problem with are lawyers, engineers, and IT people. And that seems like that's all we have in this area outside of Boston. I know when I get them in a theta state, because then they are able to travel easily to either world and interact with their helping spirits. As for myself, I originally taught myself how to journey by using The Way of the Shaman, Michael Harner's seminal book on shamanism. And for the first 3 months, I couldn't get anything to happen because I was taking the book way too literally. And I would just close my eyes and listen to the drumming, and I was just waiting for things to appear, with my eyes closed. And then all of a sudden one day, fortunately, I think one of my guides helped me out here and said, "No, you're doing it wrong. It's time for us to help you. You might have to make up part of this at first." So when I'm teaching now, I encourage my students, if they're having any problems traveling to either world, or even once they get to the world, to talk their way through it. And by that, I mean, if say we're traveling to the lower world, and an easy way to do that is to walk up to a big oak tree and imagine there's an elevator in it. So you press the down button, the doors open, you walk in, and you look on the control panel for lower world. You press that button, the elevator doors close, take you down, they open. When they open, you see a wooden door in front of you, and you reach out, grab the handle, open the wooden door, and step through into the lower world. So if someone is having problems visualizing with their mind, I have them talk out loud every single step of the way what they are doing. And this at least gets them to the lower world. And then I'll tell them what to look for when they open that wooden door. I'll say, just imagine a green meadow with a dirt path directly in front of you that leads off to a grove of trees, 100 yards in front of you, and just start walking down that path. So I would have them say, I'm opening the door, I'm walking through the door, I see a green meadow, I see a dirt path in front of me, I'm going to walk down this dirt path towards the forest. And by the time they get on that dirt path, even if they're having problems, animals start appearing. And they're not imagining the animals. Those are the helping spirits that come by. So I ask them to have interactions with the animals, speak to them, say hi, introduce themselves, ask them if they're going in the right direction, or if they should be, if they can point them in the direction of something very interesting for them to see. And when they do this, even if they're having problems, they come back after that first journey and say, wow, I had to talk my way through it, but then all of a sudden these deer started showing up, and a bear showed up, and then there were 2 lions, and they're absolutely wide-eyed. So that's when I know that they hit the theta state. For myself, once you've got a few thousand journeys under your belt, you can reach that state without drumming. I was worried, and I took a workshop last year, and I remember asking my instructor during a break, I said, I'm really worried because I'm not journeying and seeing these fabulous metaphors that everyone else is anymore. And I said, I have journey envy, because when I journey now, I go right to the lower world. I ask the question, I get the answer, I come right back. I'm only gone 3 minutes instead of the usual 15 or so. And I was worried I was doing it wrong. And he looked at me and he said, "No, Brad," he goes, "that's what you aspire to." He goes, "You're doing it absolutely perfectly." And that was nice to know, but I miss those journeys that are just so spectacular and fabulous that you think about them for weeks afterwards. Now it's more along the lines of work, where you go and you get the answer, you come back, you notify your client, and you help your client with that information. So I don't get to journey for pleasure all that much. But I'll do the occasional rattle journey if I'm doing an in-person healing. But most of the time now, it's just a matter of just reaching out with my mind and journeying without drums or rattles, and just going right into that theta state just from practice.
Yeah, I imagine it's like any other muscle. Once you do it over and over, it's easier to get into that state. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, you talked about lower and upper worlds. How does that, or does it, interact with multiple dimensions? I noticed you talked about 12 different dimensions possibly on your website. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how that works?
That's another great question. And that is something that I've been discussing with one of my mentors, because I feel that I've taken my shamanic work into the 21st century. Taking this ancient work and kind of brought it in by using multiple dimensions and by interacting with star beings and things like that. I have this theory that 50,000 years ago, the reason that primitive man saw animals in the lower world and humans in the upper world is because that's all he could relate to. The animals becoming helping spirits, I think, was something that was very easy for primitive man to accept, because he knew the animals as beasts that gave him food and gave him clothing and gave him tools. And in the upper world, the only other thing that he was really, really familiar with was other people. So for the spirits to show up in human form, excuse me, was kind of a no-brainer, a natural thing. I now think that, there are times when I'm journeying and I have hit those higher dimensions. And that's usually when I'm doing 30-minute or longer journeys. And it takes me to places outside of this universe. It takes me to, I died in 1983, and I was out on tour with one of the bands, and we had a day off, and I was in my hotel room, and I had a little bit of a drug problem back then, and I died of a cocaine overdose, and I was in my room, and I distinctly remember rising up out of my body, looking down, and the feeling of peace and serenity and love that I felt as I was departing this planet was incredible. And but I was sent back. I was told it wasn't time, and I was sent back to my hotel room, and I made it through the night by myself. That same feeling is I get when I do these extended journeys. So I know that I have left the lower world, I've left the upper world, and I've traveled somewhere very special to us, because our home is the fifth dimension. And that is pure love. That is the feeling that I get when I, I've had many journeys where I've gone through our galaxy and other galaxies, and then out the edge of the universe into just nothingness, and then come upon the home of Source, which was an incredible experience. And once again, that overwhelming feeling of love that I have experienced in the past on multiple occasions, and being consumed by Source, because we all are one anyway, even though we think we're all individuals. But when I reach that point, I am one with everything, and I'm part of the collective consciousness. And it's an incredible experience. But that tells me that there's more to shamanism than we really talk about. And it's, for me, that's going to higher dimensions. Other people may look at it differently. But from my dying experience, I mean, I know I switched dimensions then. And since the feeling was so similar, I know that I've been, in those higher dimensions. And once again, it's just so fabulous. It's something I wish everybody could experience, because we probably have one heck of a lot less negative stuff going on in this physical incarnation.
In your opinion, why do you think we live in the fifth dimension, as it were?
Well, we are essentially, we're just having a physical incarnation right now. This is an illusion. We are balls of energy. We're energy consciousness. This is not our home. The earth is not our home. We are not humans with souls. We are souls having human experiences. We've all lived hundreds, if not thousands, of lifetimes. We keep coming back to learn more and more and more about love and about forgiveness, because the entire universe is love. Source created our universe with love, and that is the most powerful force that exists.
You just said something that I want to make sure people realize. It's an important distinction, I think. I don't remember exactly who said it, but they said we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, which I think is very important.
It really is, and thank you for repeating that. The Earth is the only place in the universe where we're born with the veil of amnesia, and we have absolutely no recollection when we're born of our connection with Source, and that allows us to experience all of the negatives that exist in this plane of physical incarnation. And we need to experience these all of these negatives, because it increases our knowledge of love and forgiveness. Each one of us, in our hundreds and thousands of incarnations, we live many, many different roles. When we're home in the fifth dimension, we all live in little groups, soul groups, and it might be anywhere from 15 to 30 souls in a particular group, and you all incarnate together and help each other learn. So, for instance, my wife and I, in this existence, of course, I'm her husband and she's my wife. In other lives, she's been the husband and I've been the wife, or she's been the mother and I've been the son, or I've been the father and she's been the daughter. And we have also gone through every permutation of loss possible, where she would be the mother, I would be the infant baby that dies after 17 months, so that she can learn about the loss of a loved one at that age. In another lifetime, we would lose a son at 15. But you go through every single possible permutation of existence through your hundreds and thousands of lives to learn about love and forgiveness. And forgiveness is absolutely huge because, we're supposed to experience joy during each lifetime, and that's becoming harder to do, which is, why the divine is wrapping up this third dimensional experience with the fifth dimensional ascension. But everything that we learn about forgiveness increases our vibration and brings us closer to source, so that when we finish our incarnations and we can just stay home all the time, we have other work to do there, where we will work with other souls who are still incarnating, and we're like the wise uncle or something. We'll be the guide for them. So it's, I find it fascinating that we have so much to learn. But, out of all the souls in existence, only 10% come to the earth, because we're like the Navy SEALs or the Green Berets of the souls by coming to the earth, because it is so darn difficult here. And that's why each one of us have so many guides and angels assigned to us. Just recently I saw a quote, and I wish I knew who to attribute this to, but I do want to share it because it's so powerful. And it says, if you knew who walks beside you on this path that you have chosen, fear would be impossible. We have so much support with us that there's no reason for anyone to fear anything on this planet. And yet fear is the most common debilitating emotion that exists.
Well, somebody pointed out that, a lot of people would say, oh, the opposite of love is hate, but actually the opposite of love is fear, if you really look at it on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
So that makes total sense.
That was Wayne W. Dryer, and all I have to say about that is Google is one hell of a drug.
Thank you for that, James.
he's the one who said that, yeah. So what happens when you rescue the princess? What happens at the end of the game and you've gone through all your incarnations and you don't have anything else to learn, if there is such a thing?
Well, there's nothing else. There wouldn't be anything else to learn from physical incarnation, but we are immortal. We exist forever. Time is such a strange thing that time was woven into this third dimensional existence, basically, in my opinion, to ensure that karma works. Because if you don't have time, you can't have the concept of karma.
Yeah, time is what keeps everything from happening all at once.
Yeah,
you can't have cause and effect without it.
Even though, and this is a tough one for me to wrap my head around, that like every time I go into my Akashic records and I ask questions, they'll tell me, yeah, everything happened at once. That Big Bang was the entire existence of the universe, and then boom, it was over. So, past, present, and future have already happened, and we live all of our lives simultaneously. It's still tough for me to wrap my head around that. But I do understand that, because, there's many times in my life so far where I've felt something really disturbing. Like one night it felt like I was stabbed through my midsection, with a sword. And I realized I had just died in another life. And that was really intense pain. And that was a spillover from another life. So, they will tell you that or the spirits will tell you that we live all of our lives simultaneously, but because of time, it just doesn't seem that way to us. Our human minds have a tough time wrapping around that concept.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a fish trying to figure out what you use a chainsaw for. It just doesn't really, it doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense, because we're stuck in the river and that's all we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to sort of wrap your head around. that. So you already talked a lot about this in sort of our mission and the truth about you. So let's kind of jump into your first book. What would you, if you were to summarize it in, just a couple of lines, what would you say the message of, your book, The Truth About You is?
I tried to put into print the most important things that people need to understand about physical incarnation. That Spirit told me, when I've written 3 books so far, and they're all short. They're only 70 pages. It's a big font, because my eyes are bad, and they're easy to read. And Spirit told me I would do that because in today's society, nobody has any spare time. We're all trying to, make a buck to put a roof over our families' heads and food on the table. So people can read these in a very, very short period of time. But it's very important information that, in my opinion, should be shared with everyone in elementary school. There are ways to manifest the life that you want. And I give many examples of that in my book. I mean, I start at the very beginning with the description of us as energy consciousness, living in the 5th dimension, incarnating on Earth, and, just constantly going back and forth. Because, when we're in the 5th dimension, we really look forward to physical incarnation because it's so darn real. And it's, when we're home, we have instant manifestation abilities that we can manipulate energy any way we want and create anything that we want. Not so here in the 3rd dimension, but there are ways to train your mind to work toward that, and there are ways that you can manifest your perfect life. And, there's tons of people from Tony Robbins on down who, preach this constantly. And when I had experiences in my life where seemingly magical things started happening, I stopped and I went, wow, I just manifested that. There is no such thing as magic. There isn't any such thing as miracles either, because miracles are just being tuned in to who we are and the worlds around us and the beings around us, and manipulating matter with our minds. And that goes for everything from illness, because illness is created in our minds, manifests first in the spirit body, and then if it's not taken care of course, our physical bodies become ill. And then the spirit body has to be cured in order for the physical body to integrate that healing and become healed itself. I talk about accidents and coincidences because it's very important for everyone to know there is no such thing as an accident and there is no such thing as a coincidence. Everything's planned. Not every single moment of our lives is planned, but the major accomplishments are planned. We are all born with free will, so we can change that future at any time. I always hear from people that go to psychics that, oh, geez, I had such a wonderful reading and she was so spot on, and then she told me about what was going to happen in the future, but none of that ever came true. Well, it didn't come true because that future reading was only good for that moment in time, assuming that you didn't make any decisions that would counter any of the possibilities that the medium just told you about. So when you start exercising free will, you start changing the future. And, again, we know that there are basic things that are planned out ahead of time, as far as, say, meeting your spouse and having kids and things like that. But I think, one of the most important things for people to understand is the manifestation part of our 3rd dimensional physical existence, that we can bring to creation, to fruition, anything that we think about. And that's really, really powerful. I teach a class called How the Universe Works, where I explain the laws of the universe to my students. And I give them very specific examples about manifestation. And there's one that always makes a pretty good impression. 2 years ago, I went to the hospital, January 2014, or 13, sorry. I went to the hospital in the middle of the night in January with a heart problem. I couldn't breathe, and I was coughing up fluid from my lungs. And I got in the hospital. They got me stabilized. They did a full chest CAT scan, and they found a tumor on my left kidney. And so I had kidney cancer. And I ended up losing my left kidney. No big deal. We have two of them. I'm perfectly fine, perfectly healthy. And I didn't let that affect me at all. When the urologist came in my room and introduced himself, I said, "Oh, what are you here for?" And he said, "Well," and he told me about the tumor. And I said, "Okay, when do you want to do it?" And he said, "Well, call me when you get out of here." And so we ended up doing it 2 months later. And after I had my kidney removed, I was unable to deal with the colder temperatures of Massachusetts. And, it'd be 70 degrees out, and I was freezing. So I told my wife, I can't put up with this. My body has changed. I'm going to move to Florida. My father was down in Naples. I love the Venice, Florida area, which is Gulf Coast between Naples and Sarasota. And I started looking on Craigslist for a house to rent. I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew what I wanted to pay, but I couldn't find anything. So I said, the heck with it. I booked a flight. I flew down, got a hotel, woke up on the first morning down there, and on Craigslist there was exactly a brand new listing for exactly what I wanted, for exactly what I wanted to pay. I called the number on there. Guy said, "Sure, I'll meet you there in an hour." I said, "What's the address?" He said, 1185 Hudson Road. Hudson's my last name. I started laughing. I said, "I'll meet you there." I showed up there, loved the house. When I walked in the kitchen, on the side of the refrigerator was a sticker, which was an air conditioning maintenance log, and it was filled in 3 times by a technician named Brad. So I immediately wrote out a check for first, last, and security because I told the guy that's all I needed. I knew that the angels put this together for me. I was in there that afternoon measuring the windows and whatnot, and there's a knock on the door, and there's a gentleman standing there, and he goes, I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Yeah, who the hell are you, and what are you doing in my house?" And I said, "Excuse me?" He said he was the leasing agent for that house. I had this sinking feeling that I had just been taken for $7,000. And I said, "Look," I explained to him what happened. I said, "Can you call your boss?" Okay. He calls his boss. Here he finds out that the guy who owned the house had been approached 3 days prior by the fellow that I gave my check to, who wanted to buy the house in a cash deal. And it came together so fast that the previous owner didn't have time to tell his leasing agent that he didn't own the house anymore.
Wow.
So that was the angels, once again, putting everything together for me. And the point of this story is we don't have to figure out how to make things happen. That is the universe's job. All we need to do in this third dimensional physical incarnation is set our intention for what we want and then start taking steps toward it. I set my intention for living in Florida. I started looking on Craigslist and calling realtors. Didn't work. I mean, I spent an entire month looking for a place and I couldn't find anything, and I was pretty bummed out. But little did I know that in the meantime, the universe was very, very busy and found somebody to buy this house on Hudson Road and make it available for me when I needed it. So that's a very powerful story that indicates the power of the universe to bring things to fruition. As humans, we can only think of a couple of ways to do things, how to do things. Let the universe figure out how to do that, because they can go through so many back alleys and have myriads of possibilities of different combinations of ways to make things happen for you. And that is very powerful information, and that's life-changing for people. Stop worrying about how this is going to happen or how that's going to happen. Live in the now. Live in the ever-present moment, which brings up another thing from my book, and that is we all live in our past. That's not good. We keep making the same darn decisions over and over based on how we did it in the past. And we all have these little movies that play through our minds constantly that deal with blame, shame, anger, guilt, resentment, coulda,
Regret.
woulda, shoulda, all that stuff. Geez, I shouldn't have let that guy talk to me that way. Or, oh, I wish I would have said this when he was yelling at me. And that stuff's no good. I mean, it's a learning experience, but once it's over, it's over. And I give my clients a very easy way to get rid of all that stuff. And that is, every time one of these movies appears in your mind, stop. Send love and forgiveness to everyone involved, and say this out loud, because you have to say it out loud. It's much more powerful that way. But say, I send love and forgiveness to everyone involved, but I especially send love and forgiveness to myself. Thank you, everyone, for the lessons that I learned from you, but I don't need you anymore. Goodbye. And just by saying that little movie has now disappeared and won't be coming back. And in the matter of just a few months, most people can get rid of everything from their past so that they are living in the ever-present moment, and they're now making decisions based on how I feel right now, not based on what I used to do, or even more importantly, you're not making decisions based on what other people think you should do. You are living your path. You are not living anyone else's path. So, another expression that I love is, it's none of your damn business what anyone else thinks of you. That is really powerful too.
Yep.
Forget
I think
that
that could.
stuff.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, forget all of that stuff. When people are telling you what to do, say thank you and walk away. It's all up to you. It's your path. You are the only one responsible for your path. Everyone else is walking their path, and they are the only ones responsible for that. And, that's something I think I've known my whole life, because I've lived my entire life never, ever caring what anyone else thought. So I've always been, a little bit of that oddball, that strange kid, who would hang by himself or go do things by himself that, other people wouldn't do.
Yeah, man, those are deep, deep words of wisdom. If those two exercises, if you could get everybody to release all of the emotional baggage they're holding on to, and let those little movies go and just forgive, don't necessarily forget, but just forgive, and keep the positive, keep the lessons, and then just live in the moment. If you can just do that, it would change the way we interact with everybody around us. It would literally change the world.
Also, you mentioned earlier how we have to be careful that we're not doing something because someone else thinks we should do it that way. Another thing I've run into, though, is in my mind when I think about something, I'm trying to think, how do I really feel about this versus how do I think I'm supposed to feel about this? And that can be sticky territory.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's, and I'm sure you know this. I mean, it's how you feel about it in that moment. And when I get the impression that when you say, well, how should I feel about it? That's when you're bringing all of your outside influences into play.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And and that's where, if you've gotten to that point where you can distinguish between those two, you've got most of the battle won. Because you can stop thinking about how you should feel about it and just concentrate on how you feel in that moment, because that's the only legitimate thing. And I should also mention that, what has led me through my entire path so quickly is listening to my heart and not my head. That was difficult for me to learn. But it's so very important that your ego is always there trying to protect you. And in order to make things work like manifestation, you have to have such strong faith in Source that you know without a shadow of a doubt that Source is going to be there and protect you. They say Source never gives you more than you can handle, and that's true, even though it seems sometimes like we're a little overwhelmed. But that's when you should fall back on your help and call upon your guides and your angels to help out, because they will not interfere unless you specifically ask them, and they are forbidden to interfere unless you ask. So if anytime that you're having a problem, reach out, ask your guides for help, ask your angels for help. Tom Moore, in his book, The Gentle Way, describes a very specific way to ask for help from your angels, and that is, excuse me, I'd like to request a most benevolent outcome for, and then fill in the blank, please and thank you. So whether it's, getting that primo parking spot at the hot new restaurant, or it's resolving an issue between you and your spouse, ask your angels for help. If you don't, they're bored out of their minds. They're just sitting around playing cards. Put them to work, and put them to work 100 times a day. The more, the better. And there is nothing too trivial for them to do, because they know that this earthly existence, it's that culmination of all of the everyday pressures that get to us. And so if they can help us out by giving us a good parking space, that takes a little pressure off of us. And I ask for help from them every time I get in my car. I ask for a most benevolent outcome for my trip from point A to point B, and the same for the return trip. If I'm going into meetings, I ask for a most benevolent outcome. I asked for a most benevolent outcome prior to this radio interview. I'm always using that. And once you get used to it, it becomes a really nice habit. And you always know that you have them looking out for you, looking over your shoulder. And that's a terrific feeling.
That really sets your positive intention in motion, especially if you do that over and over and over again. You're always expecting that benevolent outcome, and you're going to generally get what you expect. That's great programming, man. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, if we can, and talk about Vision Quest's The Truth from the Wilderness, or True Stories from the Wilderness, one of your other books. What was your first Vision Quest? We talked about this a little bit in the pre-talk, but it's an interesting story. Can you walk us through some of the more eventful Vision Quests that you had, how that led you to get to where you are now?
Yeah, my first Vision Quest was the Green Mountain National Forest in Vermont. And I do want to mention Sparrow Hart, who has a website, questforvision.com. Sparrow was my leader on all my Vision Quests. He trained with Stephen Foster, who's the originator of the modern Vision Quest. Foster started out in the Bay Area, San Francisco, back in the 60s, working with troubled youth. And he discovered, he was very interested in Native American traditions, and he discovered that by taking kids who were in jail, teenagers, who had very troubled backgrounds and, jail time and stuff like that, taking them out into the wilderness, into the mountains for 4 days and 4 nights and leaving them by themselves was a terrific way for these kids to come to grips with who they are. And it was very successful in turning kids' lives around. So, excuse me, Sparrow will take a group of up to 8 people in various locations around the United States, and he will spend 4 days prior to the Vision Quest going over rituals and ceremonies and medicine wheel teachings, and basically giving us all of the tools that we will need while we are out there alone. I do want to say, while I'm thinking of it, to your listeners, please don't try to do this alone. Please do not go out into the wilderness by yourself for 4 days and 4 nights without food. You always need a buddy. You have to have a buddy system. We used a rock pile that we would go to once a day and move some rocks around so that our buddy, when he or she came to the rock pile later that day, would know that we were okay. So that's real important. I really want to stress that.
Yeah, that's good advice.
But still, even though we were a group of 8, the closest person to us was about a mile. So we are all spread out. And the area we were in was, that was about a 5-mile hike back, I think, from the nearest paved road. Now, when a Vision Quest, you are by yourself. You have a sleeping bag, you have a notebook, a pencil, and some water or a water filtration device, and that's it. We are so wired in this modern world that, and it's so different from growing up in the '60s, that it's very difficult for people to be completely alone. In the the normal course of your day, think about how many times are you actually completely alone and cut off from everyone? Pretty much never. And with all of our electronic devices, we're always connected with everyone else. When you get out,
oh yeah, you don't even have a moment in the bathroom. You're on Facebook or Twitter or MySpace or whatever.
Constantly. So people don't understand the power of their own thoughts. And, Vision Quests are not for everyone. You need to be very good friends with yourself. There are instances of people getting out there and just can't handle the pressure of their own thoughts for 4 days and 4 nights, and they'll come in early. But having said that, the power of being there and the power of source and spirit and guides and angels keeping you safe is phenomenal. Now, most people, the Vision Quest that I've done, most people are there because they've had a very serious change in their life and they're trying to figure out their next steps. Many people are there because they lost a spouse, they lost a job, they lost everything they owned. It's usually a negative experience that sends them on a Vision Quest. I was different. I was there strictly to enhance my connection with spirit. And I couldn't think of any better way to do it than to be out in nature. And as a shaman, nature is what we're all about anyway. I had already been talking to the trees, the plant divas, the elementals, the fairies. So that was fairly easy for me. A lot of people get weirded out about the fact of, sleeping under the stars in the middle of a wilderness area, when maybe they haven't been camping since they, for 30 years, since they were teenagers. I find that, once again, spirit takes care of you. That's something I try to make sure everyone in the group understands. And again, these are not all spiritual people. So some of them don't really get it until they come in after the 4 days. But my experiences in Vermont were fantastic. The third night it rained, and it just poured. And I was absolutely soaked from head to toe. And I found myself laughing through the entire experience, because I just knew at one point during those 4 days. I mean, it's Vermont, it's New England. They say if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes and it'll change. And it did. And it just poured buckets for about 4 hours that night. And I, instead of it, I hate being cold and wet. And I was really cold and wet. And instead of it triggering my old responses of getting really pissed off and sitting there and just seething in anger, I found it so refreshing to be lying there with the raindrops splashing all over my face, just laughing and saying, this is terrific. Now I've got the full experience. And the next day, I took everything out to. I was in a very dense area of the forest, so it was very claustrophobic where my power spot was. But about 100 yards away, there was a clearing, which was a swamp with some medium-sized rocks sticking out of the ground. Big enough that you could sit on them. And that was about all there was to sit on, because the rest of it was swamp. And I dragged my sleeping bag and took off my clothes to dry out that next day. And I'm sitting there and I'm writing in my notebook, and a dragonfly comes by and spends a few hours with me. And the next thing I know is, and I knew this swamp area very well because I had been hanging out there for 3 days already, because it was the warmest place around, where I could get direct sunlight. But on this fourth day, my last full day, I looked over at the edge of this one swampy pool, and I noticed some color there that I did not see the previous 3 days. And it wasn't that far from me, about 35 feet. And I walked over, and here, lying on the ground, was a bouquet of happy birthday balloons that were purple and gold with long ribbons, 20 feet of ribbons hanging from them. And obviously they had escaped from someone's party and landed in this spot. But I knew that they weren't there for the 3 days prior. And I heard Spirit telling me that it was my birthday, because in the shamanic tradition, when the shamans go into the forest on a vision quest, not only do they not come back till they get a vision, but it's the symbolic death of the former human and the birth of the shaman. And so what they were telling me was that I had just experienced a rebirth, and they sent me birthday balloons. And I kept those balloons. I kept them with me. I still have them, because they are very, very special to me. But I mean, I was in the middle of freaking nowhere, and those balloons just appeared like a quote miracle, unquote. But I know that was all planned, and that was very exciting. The second vision quest I did in May of 2014 was very different. It was in the Valley of the Gods area of southeastern Utah. That is an area, it's high desert. It's about 7,000 feet elevation. It was the end of May, so it was hot. It was around 100 degrees. The second day I was there, I had a digital thermometer with me, and it broke when it hit 115. It just stopped working. No shade except for any tall red rock that you could find. It was all just pinyon pines and juniper bushes. And we carried our water in with us there. So I carried 6 gallons of water in. 6 gallons of water weighs a lot. You don't really realize how heavy a gallon of water is until you have to carry it a couple miles. This was a very interesting experience because from day one, I discovered I had a nail in my boot, and it dug a big hole in the bottom of my foot during the first day that we were out there, and I was a little freaked out because when I took my boot off after a few hours, because it was very uncomfortable, and I thought, I don't know what I thought, but I waited a while till I took my boot off, and here I had this dime-sized hole in the bottom of my foot, and I thought to myself, geez, I still have 3.5 more days and nights to go through before I can go back. And I didn't have a first aid kit with me. And I got one of my frequent downloads, and I was told, go get the sap of the pinyon pine tree and stuff it in that hole, and then just put your sock back on. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. The next morning, when I took my sock off, I peeled the sap off my foot, and the hole in my foot looked like brand new skin. I mean, it was just bright and pink and, just fantastic. So I got some fresh sap and put it over that, and I had zero problems with my foot the entire time. It was very cool how that healed. But the lessons from Spirit on this one this vision quest were very intense, very dramatic. I was shown that the red rock that surrounded me it looks so strong from the outside, from far away. As you see these magnificent monuments of red rocks, thrusting up out of the ground, hundreds and hundreds of feet up into the air, and they're just incredibly gorgeous. Yet, when you get up close to the red rock, you find out that it's very brittle and falling apart, and it reminded me of my clients, that they show up to me with this facade of togetherness, and then once we start talking, they kind of fall apart. And it's my job to help put them back together, to give them the tools to put everything back together the way that they want it. And I thought that was a very, very powerful lesson for me that they showed me, with the red rock. The other lessons were more about survival. When I was done with that one, I swore up and down I would never ever do another vision quest, because that kicked my ass, literally. It was one of the 8 people was a former Marine, and even he said he had a really tough time with it. But the lessons that I took with me were that, once again, Spirit protected me. That's a land of many, many scorpions and rattlesnakes and everything else. And I only saw one scorpion the whole time. It was when I woke up the 4th day, there was a tiny little guy that was hanging out around my head, and he was just watching and wasn't bothering me. So I'd spend a while talking to him, and then he finally scuttled off. It doesn't matter what the conditions are. Spirit will take care of you, will provide for you, and will also give you exactly what you need, no matter what condition you were in, whether it was, the beautiful maple oak, lush forests of Vermont, or the high, dry desert of Utah, southeastern Utah. There still is so much to learn. That each time I've been out on a quest, I've filled a spiral notebook with writings, just everything that comes to me. But I do have to admit, the last 2 days of the Utah quest were more about finding shade and just trying to conserve my energy than anything else. Overall, going without food for 4 days and 4 nights was the absolute easiest part of each quest. there were other things that were far more difficult than that.
Yeah, that heat's got to be difficult to manage. As you were talking about the scorpions, couldn't help but think and chuckle a little bit. I wonder if you were the scorpions' vision quest, and he went out there and saw a big white guy in the middle of the desert and went, "Holy crap! What the hell's going on?" Went back and told all his scorpion friends. Guess what I found?
That's a great one. I never thought of that. I can see it though.
You mentioned several times when you were out on these power quests or vision quests that you found your power spot or were looking for your power spot. In Carlos Castaneda's The Teachings of Don Juan, they talk about the spot there. Is that very similar to what you're talking about? Or I'm sorry, I should ask if you've read The Teachings of Don Juan first.
Well, yeah, I did read them, but that was back in the 70s. So I don't remember in what context he used that word spot.
But he was talking about the same thing you're talking about. It's fundamentally the same concept. Yeah, I've had that same recurring thought several times that if you'd read Carlos Castaneda's work, because you use a lot of trigger words that he uses to describe some of that stuff. So I was wondering if you were familiar with his material.
Yeah, I mean, I was very into that when I was in college. Those were, those were back in the days of my only experiences with psychedelics. But a power spot is a spot that you're drawn to because of the energy emanating from that spot. In other words, on my first vision quest, when I was told I couldn't go to that beach area, I was walking back the main path toward base camp when something got my attention to my right, and it was deep, deep, deep in the woods. But I just kind of blew it off, and I kept walking. And then I went, after about 50 yards, I stopped and I went, "Brad, you know better. Go back there and check that out." So I walked back, and I found the spot again where something had gotten my attention. And I just started walking through all of the underbrush and in a straight line. And I was maybe 30 yards back into the deep forest, and I found two trees that were very unusual. One came out of the ground, went up about 10 feet, and made a perfect half circle, went back into the ground. Right next to it was a tree that came up about 6 inches, and then it made two S's that were horizontal to the ground, and then went straight up vertically for about 2 feet, and then broke into a U, and then those U branches went straight up vertically about 20 feet. The moment I saw those two trees, I knew that was my spot because they were so unusual.
It sounds like a shaman did some really good drugs there at one point.
Yeah, it was, and there was a little grove of evergreens where the bottom, 3 feet were dead branches, very closely grouped together, and there was just enough room inside of them for me to lie down. And it was extremely claustrophobic. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't like to be cold or wet, and I'm also a little claustrophobic. So it made sense that was my power spot. And I had to be very careful of the dead branches because I asked permission of the forest to be there. Then I asked permission of the tree, these specific trees, to be there. And I promised I would do my best not to break any of their branches, even the dead ones. And in return, they agreed to keep care of me and take care of me, make sure nothing happened to me. But I had to put my socks over the limbs that were above my head when I went to sleep at night because I could easily take an eye out if I sat up quickly. It was that claustrophobic. But I'm sure that, you guys have experienced when you're walking through nature that all of a sudden a particular area just kind of catches your attention and you go walking over. And this happens to me in forests all the time. And I'll find little clearings, whether they're 3 feet in diameter or sometimes they're 12 feet in diameter, and there's so much energy there, and I know that is a spot where fairies have dances, where the elementals congregate, and it's this has happened to me just about every time I go into the forest, and I can think back onto vacations I've taken by myself, where I've been in new forests, and found these power spots, and then I would just sit there for hours, and the things that would come to me would be spectacular. And so that's what I mean by a power spot. It's a particular physical location that calls out to you and basically says, "Hey, this is where you need to be for the next 4 days and 4 nights, or however long you're in that area."
So I want to touch on, I think, your last vision or the next vision, but you mentioned a couple of times too, the word downloads, that you get these downloads. And you know, I've talked about this a little bit offline, but can you sort of elaborate on what that's all about?
Yeah, I only just realized in the past 6 months that they're actual downloads, and that I believe the term is clairsentient. Um, I just know things, and this information just pops into my head. Um, I guess I don't. Before I woke up, I don't know. I can't really recall how I explained that to myself, because it certainly has happened my entire life. But now that I know a little bit more about the universe, I realize that these are downloads coming from uh, either my guides, my angels, or power animals, teachers in human form, whatever helping spirit it is. They are giving me information that I need to know. Some people will hear it. Um, some people will actually see words going by their eyes. Um, but I call it a download because it's just like somebody opened up the top of my head and just, threw some stuff in there and closed it up. And then suddenly I have new knowledge. Um, and
So it's almost like channeled information, sort of.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. I never considered myself a channel, but now I'm thinking that maybe I need to try automatic writing or something like that and see what happens, because I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, I've had that experience several times, especially when somebody asks me a question that's just sort of, we'll be having a deep conversation or something, and they ask me, well, how do you do this thing? Or, what do you think about this? And my mouth is engaging and it's going, and my lips and my tongue are flapping, and I'm as surprised as they are to hear what comes out of my mouth. And I'm going, I need to write that down before I forget it, because that sounded really professional.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's why I keep tablets all over my house, because I learned the hard way. I've in the past forgotten way too much important stuff, and so now I make sure I've got something to write it down, because it's got a very dreamlike quality to it, and if you
It does, it'll slip away.
yeah, that it'll leave.
Yeah. And it's a lot like, too, you had touched on this, and this is sort of one of my earmarks I look for in a truly awakened person. It's a lot like remembering something you had forgotten. It's not necessarily new information, but it's just like, oh yeah, I've done that before, or I've seen that before. And you don't ever remember, doing it, but it feels much more like remembering, as opposed to, learning algebra, and, that takes monumental effort. For me anyway, as opposed to, it's just boom, it's there. You didn't know the information until somebody asked you, and then it just pours out of you like water.
Yeah, and like you and I talked offline, that we both have had that experience of remembering our shamanic pasts,
Yeah.
and what we've done. And you're right. It seems like when you need it, the information is there.
Yeah. So somebody's just got to pull it from you. That you got to have the right catalyst, and it's just there.
Yeah. Yeah, many times I've gone in to do healings, and I'm thinking to myself, how the heck am I going to do this? And then all of a sudden, bam, there's all the information has just been dropped into me, and it's a technique that I've never used before, but it works great for that individual. And then, I now have more tools for my tool chest at the same time.
Yeah, you just got to have. Man, I've run into that several times. You're going to go help somebody, and you're like, man, I've never run into this. And yeah, I personally can get a lot of anxiety over that because I'm like, I'm not sure how this is going to happen. And then you get there and it's just like you get this inspiration and it just sort of pours out of you. And that's taught me over the years to trust in source or faith or, giant pudding aliens or whatever you believe in for your higher power, because it's going to be there as long as you believe in it. I have a really hard time though, not getting caught up in the right now, I don't know, and just trust and have faith and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I went through that phase of not of questioning my abilities, because I know, before I went full time, maybe I would go a month in between healings or a month in between depossessions, and I had to go into my Akashic records and I said to them, well, you know, I, I'm not getting all that much work, so do I need a refresher course or something that, am I still as powerful as I was before? And the records would laugh and say, you have not lost any of your abilities. Just because you haven't used them doesn't mean that they have disappeared. And that's the ego coming in and, interfering with everything. Because our experience with physicality is, well, if you stop going to the gym for 3 months, well, you notice a big difference. But if you don't do healing for 3 months, you're still a powerful healer. There's no diminishing of abilities by any stretch of the imagination. And geez, I would always try to overthink it and get nervous and whatnot. But now I'm happy to say that I just know that when I put my headphones on and my blindfold on and cue the drumming, that it's all going to come to me. It will all be there, and it always is. It's fascinating to me how that works. But again, it's just that belief in source that you need. We are tested every day, hundreds of times, about our belief. And we just notice, for instance, think about this the next time you catch a cold or something. Think before you got that cold, what emotional event triggered that illness? Because that's why you got sick. You didn't get sick because you went outside without a hat, although we are trained from the time that we're little, at least here in New England, that if you go outside in winter without a hat, you're going to catch a cold. So that's a belief that's drilled into us, and that will happen.
Right.
But any illness, results from some type of emotional event, and it was that just happened to me. I'm just now getting over a bad cold that resulted from a business deal that went south. And I don't want to say anything more about it than that, but it affected me very much emotionally. And as a result, my business dried up for 10 days and I got very, very sick. And as soon as I was able to apply love and forgiveness to the situation, everything changed. I got better, and the clients started calling again. So it's really powerful stuff, our emotions.
Yeah, that's how the great game works, man. You gotta make peace with yourself before you can move on and make progress. Anything else on the Vision Quest line you wanna share before we jump into Depossession? I really want to dig into Depossession at some point, but I don't want to leave anything cool behind on the Vision Quest table.
I would just like to say that, if you feel the need to do it, do it. My my wife was very unhappy with me doing it, and kind of put her foot down, and she said, "I forbid you to do this." And I said, "Well, I already booked the flight." So if you feel it in your heart that you need to do it, by all means do it. Face your fears. You will come out of it way stronger than you went into it. And it can be an absolute life-changing event. But please don't try to do it on your own. Do it under professional supervision, and you will have an incredible experience.
And you might change the life of a little bitty scorpion somewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is this about? First, I got to ask: depossession versus exorcism. Why are you using the term depossession as opposed to the more mainstream exorcism? There's obviously a conscious decision as to why you decided to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Exorcism is not the way to go with cases of possession. I'm sorry to tell the Catholic Church that, but an exorcism is a battle. It is a fight between a priest and a spirit. And when it gets to the point of exorcisms, of course, we think about horror movies and all that kind of stuff. And these dark demonic energies and entities do exist out there, and I've run into many, many, many of them, as I know you have. And they feed off of negative energy. That's why they're here. They feed off of fear. They feed off of anger. And, they're like us. They're energy beings. So when an exorcism takes place, it doesn't come from a place of love. It comes from a place of fear. And I don't know of all that many exorcisms that are successful. In fact, in this Boston area, I've been called for so many depossession cases from people who say that they've contacted the Catholic Church and many, many different parishes, and nobody will help them out.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. It's really unfortunate. The one institution that should be able to help people often doesn't have the knowledge or resources to do it.
Yeah, and you know what? I kind of think too, James, that's a good thing at the end of the day, because again, they look at it as a battle. When I do a depossession, and I want to thank Betsy Bergstrom, who is the originator of Compassionate Depossession. I did take her workshop a couple of years ago, her week-long intensive, and she got me started on that. Well, I actually started doing depossession before that, but she showed me a different way to look at it. And I've kind of taken it and twisted it around a little bit and made it mine, because when I started depossession, I come from a place of pure love. Source is pure love. Source created the universe with pure love. Again, nothing more powerful than love in this universe. And I learned early on in ghost hunting stuff that when spirits tried to attach themselves to me, I would put up a wall of love, and they couldn't penetrate it. Subsequently, when I would talk to spiritual people, they talk about white light and all of this, and it suddenly hit me that, you know what, all of these things, whatever color light it is, it's just a form of love. And so I will sit down with the individual who's possessed. I will surround us with a bubble of pure love, and that's where I work from. I have a technique where I make contact with the being inside, or beings inside of the individual. And all I want to know is, I only ask 3 questions to start with. I ask if they have a name. I ask where they're from, and if they know how old they are. Once we get through that, I have a good idea what I'm dealing with.
Why? How old? I'm not trying to derail you, but why? How old they are?
The more difficult cases are the dark entities who are not from the earth and are so old that when I ask them, I said, I'm sorry, I will ask them another question. Do you have a heart? They will tell me no, they don't have a heart. And then in that case, I know I have to work a little bit harder than if it's just you know, 90% of these possession cases are just frightened souls that for some reason or another either A, don't know they're dead, or B, somehow missed the light. And so they're stuck in that fourth dimension between us and home, and have, you know, just all they did was dive into the nearest person they could find, because they feel more comfortable in a human body.
Okay.
Those are,
So
are easy.
you ask age to gauge the threat, basically, or to gauge kind of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, to know how much work I need to do. Because I have to. So in the case of so let's talk about a malevolent, dark entity that tells me it comes from Satan, has no idea how old it is, but it's millennia, and doesn't have a heart. So I explain to it that yes, you do have a heart. It may have been reduced to a very, very tiny cinder the size of a grain of sand because of your age, but it's still a heart. And when Source created everything, and I remind them that Source did create them as well, otherwise they wouldn't exist, that Source created them with love. So inside of this tiny, tiny, tiny little burnt up heart is the core of love. So I'll bring in the angels of the light above them, ask them to beam love into the being's heart. And it's just like how the Grinch stole Christmas. It's just like the Grinch, where its heart just starts to expand and they become buoyant and they actually begin to rise out of the client. In that case, I have the angels directly above them, and I say, reach out. There's an angel directly above you reaching out with its arms. Grab its hands, and it will not hurt you. They can be quite frightened of angels, because in this dark being's mind, you know, for millions of years, the angels have been the bad guys. They're you know, just they don't get along with them. So, but I have to reassure them that the angels are just pure love, and they will just guide them to the light. And so once I get them in the arms of the angels do the heavy lifting, take them to the light. I bring the client's mind back to the present. You know, it's almost like they're kind of lightly hypnotized, the way I work with them. And the first thing I ask them is, how do you feel? And in every instance, they say, lighter, much lighter. That's the first words out of their mouth. And then they'll tell me the experience of feeling the being actually depart their body, you know, through their crown chakra. They are different people when I'm finished. You know, they are laughing, they are in good spirits, they feel good. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience to do this. And I've even done it in a room full of people, you know, surrounding me. I don't like that because, you know, there are times when I'm not sure if there's one or many beings in there, and I don't want to put anybody else in a position where a being could just slide into their energy body. But there have been cases where people did want to watch, it's such a satisfying experience, and humbling, and you know, gratifying to know that I've helped this person out. I mean, the very first depossession experience I ever had was 4 years ago, when I was contacted by the mother of a woman who, for nearly a year, had gone to every specialist and clinic and in Canada, looking for someone to figure out what was wrong with her, and she was wasting away. She hadn't eaten really anything in 3 months. Her body was just completely wasting away, and she had no energy. And Her mother was convinced she was going to die in about a month if she didn't get help. And I journeyed to her spirit body. And here I found the spirit of the soul of her deceased fiance inside of her. This individual had committed suicide a year earlier, which coincided with when the problem started for this woman. And he didn't want to leave. He wanted to be with the only, in his words, the only person in the universe that loved him. And I had to explain to him. I had a very long conversation with him, and it all boiled down to me asking him, "Do you love her?" And he said yes. And I said, "Do you realize how badly you're hurting her by being inside of her?" And he paused and he said, "No, am I hurting her?" And I explained how he was sucking the life right out of her. And
Literally.
yeah, very literally. And I said, I know you don't want to do this because you love her so much. And I said, if you go to the light with me, I can guarantee that you can come back and be with her anytime that you want. You can still talk to her. You can still hear her talk to you. Everything will be absolutely wonderful. But the most important thing is that she will live, and you won't kill her. And he was aghast at himself for what he was putting the person he loved through, because he didn't realize it. And so I had him just take my hand, and I had my lead power animal take us to the light, and I watched him walk into the light with his loved ones. And I reached out and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm great, thank you." And I left. And I emailed the woman about an hour later, because it was really a very moving experience for me. It took me a while to compose myself. And here, within 15 minutes of me helping that individual cross over, she ate her first meal in 3 months. And then she read my email about what I did. And she regained her health almost immediately. I mean, it took a few weeks, but she is now extremely healthy and has no more problems. And that was my very first experience with it. And, when you're doing depossessions, you're helping more than just one person. You're helping more than the human sitting in front of you. You're helping the suffering being that's inside of that person. And that's actually Betsy Bergstrom's term, suffering being. And I think that that's a wonderful term, because whether it's a soul that missed crossing over, or whether it's a dark entity, I'm able to help these souls get back home and continue their work. Because, when we all have work to do when we're home, we all have our specialties, our interests that we work on. And that's what we do. So and one other thing I want to point out about depossessions is when the suffering being makes itself known to you, that is a very clear indication that it wants help, that it wants to cross. I usually go through phases where I may have like 10 depots in a row, and most of them are dark entities. And it's kind of like word gets out that, oh yeah, there's this guy, Brad Hudson, he can move us into the light. And we just need to guide, our humans to his web page so they can get in touch with him. They even though some of them, may sit there across from me and tell me, horror story stuff, that, wow, I'm gonna eat your
liver with some fava beans.
And, yeah, and that stuff is so comical to me. I just completely ignore that and go around it. And and I'm fortunate that I have no fear of these entities, that they have an extremely difficult time latching on to me, and I'm fortunate in that regard. I have had to do self-depossession on 2 occasions, but I found that self-depossession was really easy, and it's very easy to know if you're possessed, because man, all of a sudden everything just doesn't seem right. And all you need to do is just sit down and very calmly just go through those steps that I just mentioned, and you're able to do a self-depossession. And I also want to say that people, please don't try this at home without proper protection. You really need a very strong love around you. You may need to bring in additional power animals, what I call protectors, because my power animals don't do depossession with me. I have a different set of animals that I usually bring in for depossessions. So, if you don't have experience with this and you want to learn, by all means contact people that can teach you a method of doing it based on love. And that is, again, the most powerful way to do it. But make sure that you learn the protection as well. There are just too many cases of people trying to deal with malevolent energies and entities, and it goes totally wrong for them. And I hate hearing about that. But the good thing is they can call me and I can help them. Depossession work is, I think, my most gratifying work that I do, and it just reminds me how precious human life is. And it's really interesting. Just earlier this year, I had a case where I was contacted by a family whose son was possessed, and the suffering being inside of him. I went to Connecticut to visit this family, and the actual human personality was submerged so deeply that I was able to sit at a table and speak directly to the spirit for 2 hours. And
Wow.
it was an incredible experience. At the end of it, I went there to do a depot, and the being said, "Well, you know what? I've kind of changed my mind. I don't think I want to leave. If excuse me, if you want me to leave, you're going to have to force me out." And at that point in time, I was unsure exactly how to force a being out. I was pretty sure I could do it. I had a pretty clear image of how to do it in my head, but because the human personality was so far submerged, I couldn't contact it, which worried me. I didn't want to try anything brand new at that time because I didn't want to take any chance at all of hurting the human personality.
Yeah.
But I've kept in touch with the spirit, and we trade emails about every couple weeks. And I didn't think that I had helped the situation any, but my Akashic records told me that just the fact that I showed up and, excuse me, and explained to the spirit how it was violating one of the universal laws of the universe, and that is that each one of us is a sovereign entity. And we have 100% rights to our body, and no other being should interfere with that. And I said, you've come in and taken over this poor kid's body. This kid was like 17 or 18. And I said, to the point where you're not even letting him out, to talk to his parents or anything. It's just you now. And I said, how dare you come in here and take a sovereign body? I said, that is totally against the laws of the universe and totally against source. And he later told me in an email that he had never thought of it that way, and he ended up being much nicer to the kid and said that he was looking for a way to, and I'm going to quote him here, end his field trip, unquote. So I'm waiting for a reply from him right now. Actually, I just wrote to him this morning to find out how far along on ending his field trip he is. But it's really a special thing to be able to directly speak with these dead souls who are occupying these bodies, and then to know that I was instrumental in changing the way the suffering being was dealing with the owner of the body and being much nicer and allowing him to come out, and he was actually working towards saving enough money to go to see a specific person to move, to cross over, was wonderful. It just made me feel so good, because I felt like such crap when I left there that day, because I didn't think that I had helped. But when I found out that I did, it just brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to the kid and especially his parents in that situation. I did the entity talk about why he didn't want to move to the other side, or why he didn't want to disembark? Or is it a fear-based thing, or what's got him so tied to that particular meat sack, for lack of a better word?
I'm not really sure. He may have told me during our conversation, but I don't think I was concentrating on any of that. My concentration was, how the hell do I get this thing out of him? And so I'm sure he spoke about that. It's because the occupying being was very young. I got the impression that it was because when he went into 100% of his own personality, of the being's personality, it was very inner city, a lot of slang, and very aggressive and very violent. And I had the impression that the suffering being had been killed in a gunfight. That something, it was that kind of violence that had killed this being. And I think that also spilled over in how he described, or how the parents described, he was treating the human soul that was in that body, because they were very unhappy with all of that. So that's, thanks for bringing that up, because if it happens again, I'll make sure that I remember to ask that, because that's information that can be very, very useful. But at that point in time, I was concentrating on just getting it out of there.
Yeah. It's always, I always try to approach the situations from the perspective of, what is the motivation of the entity? What's the motivation of the spirit? What are they trying to get out of it? Do they not want to let go? Do they feel like something bad's going to happen? Or are they going to go to hell, or that sort of thing? And I could definitely see, the consciousness of a young sort of inner city kid not wanting to let go, because that's all they know, and they don't have enough life experience to be able to trust and just sort of let go. So they just want to hang on to what they got. That's a rough situation, man.
Yeah, and that's it's really interesting how you just described what you look for, because I just operate under the assumption that when they show up for me, they want to cross, and I want to get them across as quickly as I can. I don't want to lose that window of opportunity, which I lost with this kid.
And sometimes they do want that, but sometimes they just need to sit down and talk to somebody. And that sounds like that's what you did with this kid, and that sounds like that helped him a lot.
Yeah, and that was the first time that had ever happened for me too. That I sat down and had an extended discussion with one of those spirits. Um, really wasn't my plan. I was going to try and move him immediately and get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was interesting. And because most of the time I've never personally been interested in why are you there. It's always been about moving them out, and because I'm again in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, if this takes too long, then yeah, they might change their mind. But that's great. I appreciate you sharing that information with me, because I'll have to keep that in mind for the next opportunity that I have where I can employ that.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, man. I learned that stuff the hard way. So how does depossession compare to, it sounds like it's a completely different animal, compared to like shamanic extraction and what you call multidimensional energy healing, which are services that you offer through your website?
The extraction healing is for physical problems. That's when I journey to the spirit body of the client, and I look for what doesn't belong there. Different shamans see things that don't belong there in different ways. I just see kind of black masses, and I know that anything that looks black to me just doesn't belong in that spirit body. Now, I will always have them tell me what the problem is ahead of time, because that just saves a whole lot of time. It's, of course, we can always go looking. If they don't tell us anything, we can always go and look and find the problem. But I just find that, if I could save 15 minutes, that's great, and it'll get the client out the door and home faster. So if the client has lower back pain, and let's say it's a chronic issue, it's been there for 30 years, the doctors can't do anything about it. I'll go in there, I'll look at the lower back, I'll see the black masses in there that shouldn't be there. I will clean them out, and I even have a little psychic vacuum that Spirit gave me to get those last little crumbs that are hiding behind bones and stuff. And so I'll clear all of that out, everything that I see, and then return. And then I'll email my client and tell them what I did. Now, in some cases, healing is a two-way street. We need to know that the client is ready to release what's wrong with him or her.
Right.
If they are not ready to release the problem, I tell them, don't waste your money. Don't come to me, because I can't help you. That I've done so many healings for people, especially early on before I learned this, that didn't take, and I'm wondering, what the heck? And I'm doing, more extra healings on my own time for them, and nothing's working. And then I find out that, I'll talk to them and find out there are other issues going on in their life which are preventing them from allowing the illness to depart their physical body. So the first thing they have to do as a patient is accept that you can help them, and then allow the illness to leave. Once, if they answer yes to both of those questions, that they can do that, then I say, okay, great, let's get to work. So sometimes, there are many people who, after just one journey, have lost chronic pain. And, those are so special. When people tell me that they just had their first full night's sleep in 20 years, because of a journey I did for them, Again, I break down in tears. It's so wonderful, and to hear the joy in their voice. Oh my gosh, it makes everything worthwhile.
Sounds very fulfilling.
It really, really is, and but there's also the case of people don't want to take responsibility for their illnesses. All illness originates in our minds, manifests first in our spirit body, then is transferred to our physical body. And, even cancer is that way. I know that I caused my cancer. And that's why when I was told I had cancer, I acted very minimally, because I knew that if I got excited about that son of a gun was going to just explode inside of me. I treated it just like having a cold, and it worked. It worked great. I was released from the hospital early. I was off the morphine early. The nurses even told me that they had never had such a happy cancer patient before.
And your expectations set the pace, man.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, because you went in with the attitudes you had about it. I think that made a lot of the difference.
Well, yeah, that and the fact that there were probably about 500 angels in there watching the surgeon, making sure that his hand didn't slip accidentally. So if I try not to tell the person that of course they were the ones responsible for getting their illness, but they do need to know about their responsibility with it. So if I'm working on a chronic problem, I get rid of all that black stuff I can see. What that represents is that part of the illness that is ready to be released. And so I remove that. Now, there still may be more in there. What usually happens is the client tells me, if they're not completely cured from one journey, then they say, yeah, I feel a lot better. So I'll wait 4 or 5 days for the total integration from the first journey, and I'll go back in, and I'll see more black stuff. Once again, this is now the amount of the illness that they are willing to release at this point in time. And I'll remove all of that black stuff, and so on. So it may take 5 journeys. It may take 7 journeys. But we will keep going until they tell me to stop. But I always like to have 4 or 5 days for integration from the spirit body to the physical body in between journeys. I never tell anybody, oh, well, you have to sign up for 10 journeys and it's going to cost you this much money and you have to pay me in advance. And, I don't work like that. I want it to be minimally invasive for these people. And I want their input on it as well. That's how I do extraction work. And the extraction work, again, is strictly for physical ailments. And recently, I was given a download on how to deal with emotional problems, emotional illness. And they told me it was called emotional trauma removal. And this is a really valuable tool for my toolbox, because prior to 2 months ago, I was very unsure how to go about helping people with emotional problems. It was one night as I was falling asleep where I suddenly sat bolt upright, grabbed my pad and paper and pen and started scribbling furiously, like you described earlier, James. And basically what this is, again, going to the spirit body, opening up their head, and when I look in, I see, I don't know if you guys remember the old-fashioned diskettes on when computers, first became widely available, the 5.5-inch floppies, and then those little 3.5-inch discs. That's what they show me inside the client's mind. And so I'll see, a bunch of red discs in there, and I will remove them, and each one of them has a tether attached to it, a cord attached to it. And I follow that cord back in time to the event itself. So all I need from my client is the name of the event, whatever they want to call it, and what year it happened. I don't want any other details, because it's hard enough for them to talk about the event, just to tell me the name of it, let alone go into details. And I'm talking about stuff like rape, molestation, bullying, abuse of parents, stuff that stays with people for decades and decades. And especially in cases like rape and molestation, I don't want to know the details. So a client comes to me and says, Brad, I need to get rid of this emotional trauma. It was rape, and it was 1978. So I will go to their spirit body. I will remove those discs. I will trace that back to 1978. And when I get to 1978, I find a huge box full of emotions. And I put that and the diskettes in a pile, and I have a psychic matchbook. And I just take a match and I light it, and I set it all on fire. And it goes up in flames very quickly, and there's just some ashes left, which I sweep into a little Ziploc bag and throw that into the nearest psychic water body, and I'm done. And, I've used this on probably 30 people so far, and in every instance but one, it's been 100% effective. The person it didn't work on, I believe it was because the traumatic event was very recent. It was within 2 months of her coming to me, and it was just too soon. I tried 3 times. I couldn't let go of it because she couldn't let go of it.
She probably hadn't even had a chance to process it at that time.
Exactly. That's exactly right. But again, being able to remove these traumatic events from people's minds and allow them to get on with their life, again, brings me to tears. And very fulfilling.
You cry a lot, Brad.
I do. Well, I'm an empath, and it's something I can't even go to the movies anymore, because see a 58-year-old, 6 foot tall, bald guy, crying at every emotional thing that happens. I mean, I only go to like science fiction, fantasy movies, and comedies. The other stuff, I can't watch the news. I end up crying my eyes out. So yeah, I stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I've gone through a couple of seriously empathic episodes. It's difficult, man. Just daily life can be really traumatic. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the other stuff that you're involved in. So learn me something about soul retrieval and fragment soul retrieval and that sort of stuff. Yeah,
soul retrieval, very powerful shamanic tool. As we grow, we will leave pieces of our soul with people and places that are very, very meaningful to us. So, for instance, obviously you can start out with your parents, that, you'll leave a little bit of your soul with them when you leave the house, when you graduate from high school and you're going off to college or the army or something like that, and it's a very emotional time, and you'll leave a little tiny piece of your soul with them, and this accumulates over time. It can happen with a boyfriend or girlfriend, say your first true love in junior high or whatever, certainly your spouse, and with favorite geographic locations as well. If you go have a certain beach that you go to every summer that you've fallen in love with. You leave a little piece of yourself there every time that you leave, and this can get to the point where soul loss, can cause illness, um, and manifest itself in negative ways in your physical body and your spirit body. So the shaman will go out there and collect the missing pieces of your soul and bring them back and reinstate them in your soul by blowing them through your crown chakra and into your heart chakra. I have developed a different way of doing this from the traditional shamanic methods because I had a real aha moment several years ago, and I no longer agree with some of the established authorities about soul retrieval, or soul retrieval. That some of the authorities out there say you must be very, very careful, and that's true. You don't want to bring back a fragment that's not ready to come back. I did a soul retrieval on myself several years ago, where I brought back a piece of my 8-year-old soul that was ready to come back. And it was really cool. I journeyed to the land of lost souls, and I saw an 8-year-old Brad hiding behind a rock. And I befriended him and told him, who I was and that I was an older Brad, and asked him if he wanted to come back. And he said, yeah. And it was a wonderful integration of that 8-year-old piece into my soul, back into my soul. That was so successful, I said, hey, let's do it again. So I went back to the land of lost souls, and I found a 15-year-old Brad, and I brought it back. Well, my life turned upside down for the next week, and oh my God, I felt like a teenager, on that emotional roller coaster. And I finally realized that I never made sure if this soul fragment was ready to come back or not. I was so excited over the success of the first experience that I just automatically grabbed this one and brought it back. So I took it back. I took it back to the land of lost souls, and I deposited it there, and I said, I'll be back when you're ready. And as a result of that, I was doing some work with some other shamans, and I was surprised. A woman was working on me, and she sent her power animal off to retrieve a piece of my soul. And I said, can you do that? And I asked the instructors, and they said, well, yeah, sure. Of course, your power animal can go do that. You don't have to do it. And that was a real eye-opener for me, because I knew right then and there that sending my power animal off to retrieve soul fragments ensures that only those fragments ready to be reintegrated into the client will come back. I no longer had to worry about that, because, of course, your power animal is a compassionate, helping spirit and will never, ever, ever do anything to harm you or a client. So when I do soul retrieval now, it's a terrific experience. I go to the lower world, I get my power animal, Shadow. I say, Shadow, this is who we're working with. Go grab whatever's ready to come back, and then come on back. And Shadow always comes back with this wicker basket, and there's never more than 3 pieces, because I learned the hard way that if you try to install more than 3 soul fragments at a time, your client is going to have a really awful week or two. It's just too much to integrate at once. So Spirit has limited me to bringing back a maximum of 3. So Shadow brings back the basket, hands me the basket. I blow them into the head and heart chakras, crown chakra and the heart chakra, and then we're done. And it works brilliantly that way, because I never ever have to worry about something coming back that the client's not ready for. Now, the opposite of that, the other end of the spectrum, is soul fragment removal. And that is removing the fragments of other people's souls that have glommed onto you over the years, over your lifetime. So,
Okay.
just think of the opposite. Your mother and father have, love you so much that they have left a piece of their soul with you. Your pets, your boyfriends and girlfriends, your spouses, um, and that can reach a point where it's time to do a little house cleaning, and that's where I send shadow in. And once again, it's what is ready to be released from the individual, from the client. But there is no limitation on the number. I mean, the first time I did a soul fragment removal, and the very first time I did it, there were 27 soul fragments that I removed. And
Wow.
that's not really unusual. I just did one the other day, and there were 9 fragments, and that just means that there were 9 that were ready to leave. And I give them, and once again, I'll go to lower world, tell shadow, this is our client. Go find all the soul fragments that are ready to leave. And it's really cute, because shadow will go usually to a beachy area and dig in the sand and digs up all of the fragments, puts them in a wicker basket and hands it to me. And I'll count them and give them back to shadow, and shadow takes them to the light and disposes of them. So, you can have an awful lot of them removed. It's just a matter of whether you're ready to release, or how many you're ready to release, as to how many are actually removed. So those are 2 very common shamanic healing practices, and again, very, very ancient practices.
So this is a little off subject, but do you ever go to Shadow and ask him to go do something, and he's like, "Listen, Brad, I do all the work of this relationship. How about a milk bone occasionally? A margarita? Can we do something about that?"
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because there is a relationship between a shaman and his or her power animals, and power animals love to be in the third dimension, in physical incarnation. So I have 4 power animals right now. So I will invite them to come be with me. And, if I'm sitting down to watch TV, maybe I'm making a little popcorn, and I'll say, "Hey guys, we're going to watch a movie, and I made popcorn, and, I want all of you guys to come be with me." And boom, they show up, and they're sitting there on the sofa next to me, and I share my popcorn with them, and we watch a movie. And we might go for a walk in the woods, and I'll say, "Hey guys, I'm going to go out, and I'm taking the dogs for a walk. You want to come with me?" And boom, they're right there, and they're having a blast. And when I'm in the lower world, there's a lake very close to where I enter the lower world, and I'll take all 4 of them over there, and I do spear fishing, and I catch fish, and I feed them all fish, and they love that. So yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's not just a one-way relationship. I mean, they are helping spirits,
Right.
and they do want to do this for us, and they will work as hard as we ask them to work. But it is a two-way street, and I teach all my students that keep your power animals happy. Ask them how you can honor them. And 9 times out of 10, they just come back and say, "Hey, just invite us to be with you. That's all we want." And they love that. They love being in the physical incarnation. Most of the time, they're with me. Uh, I just know there's always 2 of them on my right and 2 of them on my left, and so I'm never alone, no matter where I am. They're always with me. But yeah, it's really you do want to remember to take care of your power animals and say thank you every time too. A little common courtesy will get you a long way.
Yeah, appreciation for that relationship,
Yep.
and the fact that it is a two-way street, man. That currency is gold.
Yeah, very much.
So you do some other sort of mundane services, but they're definitely valuable services. And so just based off what's listed on your website, you do some transformational life coaching and some death and dying counseling. And I wanted to touch on too. We've talked about this a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to be in the presence of your clients. You actually can do a lot of this stuff remotely too. Is that correct?
Yes, I've never met most of my clients, and they come from all over the world. They're guided by spirit to the website, and then they contact me. I just had a couple clients in New Zealand and Norway, and that was in the past month. So because my work is done in non-ordinary reality, I don't need them here. I just go to their spirit body. And the way that I find the spirit body is I just need their name and the city and state or town and country of where they live, because I'm looking for their vibration. Once again, we are energy beings. As Nikolai Tesla so famously said, if you understand energy, frequency, and vibration, you understand the universe.
Yeah.
And we each have a very unique vibrational signal, which is our fingerprint, and that's how we locate each other, through that vibration. So I will travel, astral travel to the spirit body, the vibration of the client, and I'll take one of my power animals with me. I used to do my work merged with my power animals, but since I've had a fifth dimensional attunement to my energy body and started working with other fifth dimensional beings, the Arcturians and Pleiadians are the two major ones that I work with. I no longer merge with my power animals. They have told me it's unnecessary, and I do the work myself. However, I do like to have the power animals there, because when I'm finished working, the first thing I do is I turn to whichever animal it is, and I'll say, okay, have I missed anything? And they will tell me yes or no. And so that's a nice confirmation that the work is being done properly. They're overseeing, and if I do something wrong, they'll tell me. But most of the time, when I'm done, it's like, yeah, you got it all, nothing else to do. Okay, let's leave. Let's go back to the lower world, and we'll go back there. I'll play with my animals for a couple minutes, and then I'll leave and come back to our middle world.
So you generally just need a photograph and a name or something along those lines, just something to lock onto that vibration?
Don't even need a photograph, just name and location.
Okay. So you offer some classes there in the Boston area, and those are live in-person classes.
Yes.
Obviously, somebody can grab the manuals off your website and go sign up for one of those classes, and the schedule's up there. Do you at the moment offer anything remotely for anybody who's in New Zealand and wants to take those classes?
I do not, but I am in the process of developing them. Thanks for asking that. It's something that at first there wasn't much of a demand. And I do travel down to the Gulf Coast of Florida. I teach down in Naples, and a store in Naples and a store in Sarasota. I've been getting more and more people asking about that, and I've finally figured out a way. I mean, shamanic journeying is, it's experiential. It's
difficult to teach online.
Yeah, there's I really really need to figure that out. And I think I have. I'll let you know once it goes live if it works or not. Um, uh, I think it will with some people. I think if people are already fairly spiritual, they can follow the directions and not have a problem. It's going to be when it's the lawyers, engineers, and IT people that try to do it and can't get it at all. Is that'll be the problems. But it's very interesting that I've now been teaching in this area for about a year and a half, and it started out very slowly, but wow, word has gotten out, and people. I actually had people come from New York City to Boston to take my introductory journeying classes, and I looked at them. I mean, they drove 4 hours, and I said, guys, out of the, what is it, 16 million people in New York City, I said, you couldn't find a shaman there to teach you journeying? But here again, it was one of those spirit things where they saw my website and they just knew immediately that they had to meet me. And so they made the drive, and, we became best friends. It was a wonderful experience. But to see the people's expressions when they walk out of the room, when they come in, they're a little hesitant. But when they leave after taking that first class, going to the lower world, I have to kick them out of the room so the janitors can shut down the building. They are so excited and have learned such profound teachings or received such profound teachings from their helping spirits that they're blown away. They had no idea that these non-ordinary reality worlds existed, let alone that they had personal spirits there that only want to help them. And there are, a lot of my students will email me periodically and go, "Oh, you won't believe the journey that I just had at home." And that's because I give them, in the first class, I give them a drumming CD that I recorded in a professional recording studio, because I want them to have a drum track that they can download on their iPod and use at any time, day or night, in the privacy of their own home, to journey to their helping spirits and receive information. It's so powerful that, some of these people will consult psychics and mediums on a regular basis to try to learn stuff about their path. And I tell them, I said, guys, all you have to do is go ask your power animal or your teacher in the upper world. They're going to give you the best information because they've been with you for hundreds of lifetimes or thousands of lifetimes, depending on how long you've been around this earth. And they know you so well. So, the people that take advantage of that and take the advice are the ones who are emailing me going, wow, this has totally changed my life for the better. And it's so fulfilling to hear what they have to say and when they're leaving. And once again, I mean, that's why I'm doing this full time now. It's because I can change the world one person at a time.
Yeah, just making a positive change on one person, in my mind, is that's like moving mountains. If you can touch multiple people, it's all the more power to you. We definitely need to get together and talk about the online learning thing. That's what I do professionally. We can talk about that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, later. I can hook you up with that. I've already got a learning environment set up that I'm building one of my online courses out, so we can get you hooked up in that capacity.
Thank you.
Cool. Anything else you want to throw in there that we didn't touch on? We're just at 2.5 hours, so we probably need to start wrapping it up here.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about my work with autism.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad you brought that up. So you talked about in your book about this, and we talked about offline, that you got a major download in working with a client on autism. So what is that about?
2 months ago, I was doing a ghost clearing in a client's house, and she happened to mention that she has a 3-year-old autistic daughter. I don't know anything about autistic kids, and suddenly information about autism just flooded my mind. So I immediately started talking so that I wouldn't forget this. And the next thing I know, that this woman's crying, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, it's just that I recognize everything that you're talking about in the behaviors of my daughter, my autistic daughter." And the gist of my download was, we as a society have misdiagnosed autism. Um, Autistic kids are not damaged goods. They are actually Homo sapiens 2.0. They are much more advanced than we are, and they are the future of the human race. They have both feet firmly planted in the spirit world. They communicate via mental telepathy. That's why they don't use words, or don't like to use words. Words are very awkward and very clumsy. Words, you always have to look at facial expressions and listen to the intonation and body language. And these kids are in the fifth dimension. They are in our home. They are very aware of our connection to source. All of their friends are souls, so they are already coming from a place of pure love. They don't understand words. They don't understand body language, because you don't need that in the fifth dimension. They don't understand all the negativity of our dimension. And they are, for instance, when they're sitting still rocking for hours, they're astral traveling. They're not even there. They're out of their body. They are in the fifth dimension with all of their friends. And consequently, they have a very, very difficult time in this dimension, because when you're used to perfection, coming here is a giant step backwards.
Yeah.
And that's what causes these problems with these kids. When they will question rules and regulations and all these things that don't exist in the fifth dimension, and they can't understand, why is this stuff happening here. So this woman Jill introduced me to other families with autistic kids, and as I speak with each family, with each set of parents, I always see this aha moment, because at first they think I'm nuts. Then they start putting two and two together and going, well, little Johnny does have all these, he's always talking to invisible friends, and yeah, we see him just sitting still doing nothing, and so yeah, this is starting to make sense. Well, I was then introduced to, in very rapid fashion, Green Hope Farm in New Hampshire, and their website is greenhopeessences.com. They make flower essences. A flower essence,
like essential oils?
No, it's not an essential oil. It is not aromatherapy. It is the electrical information from a flower in a water solution. So there is no physical part of the plant at all in the solution. And the cool thing is, Green Hope Farm is overseen by a group of angels. Green Hope Farm is in New Hampshire, and it's in a very special valley that has always been known to be very spiritual. And the family that bought the property, I think it was 20 or 25 years ago, was also very spiritual, and they made contact with the angels, and much like Finhorn in Scotland, the angels at Green Hope Farm showed them what to plant, where to plant it, how to take care of it, and then showed them how to make these flower essences. And they make essences for everything. Oh gosh, there's like 3,000 flowers, and then they'll make combinations under the guidance of the angels for specific things. Like for animals, they make one for fleas and ticks, and you put a drop in your pet's water bowl, and one drop's as good as 100 because it contains the same information, and it will keep your dogs from getting fleas and ticks, and it's perfectly safe for humans as well. I take that stuff, and I don't need I don't have to use insect repellent right now. So I contacted the farm. I asked them, can you make an autism essence? I told them what I was doing, and Molly, the owner, said, I will check with the angels. She came right back to me and said, the angels are so enthusiastic about this, it isn't funny. They want to start immediately. Okay, she goes, what do you want this to do? And I said, it probably has to make them more comfortable here. Okay. 24 hours later, she emails me, the essence is done and ready to ship. I ordered a dozen bottles, and I said, what did the angels tell you it will do? And she said, it will ground these kids more fully into the third dimension so that they are more comfortable here. And that will enable them then to share their gifts with us. Okay. So I got the bottles. The day they were delivered was World Autism Awareness Day. I had no idea that there was even a World Autism Awareness Day, but that was the day they were delivered to my house. I drove around, I distributed them to a dozen families. I mailed some off to some other families that I'm working with in Pennsylvania. And without exception, they said the first thing that they were told to do was put a couple drops in a spray bottle, like a plant mister. So you have this quart bottle, you put 1 or 2 drops in and spray the whole house. So that kind of re-EQs the electrical information of the house. Then put a drop in your child's drink in the morning and a drop in the evening. Or, if it's a half gallon of orange juice, 1 drop in the half gallon. And that's how you administer it. And it doesn't matter if the child is allergic to any of the flowers that are contained in the essence. I believe the essence contains close to 30 different flower essences. It can't harm them in any way. It's just water with electrical information. To a family, 100% of them reported that immediately upon spraying their house, their child became calmer, more focused, clearer, more verbal. It was amazing. One boy, who I think is like 11, had spent his entire life walking on his tiptoes. Within 5 minutes of having this essence, he was walking on flat feet. Absolutely incredible. But we're working with the divine here, so I shouldn't have been surprised at all. Molly made the announcement that she now has an essence for autism, and so she's selling it all over the world to people that don't even know what I'm doing right now, because I was told that I was the only one that got that download about autism, and my job now is to spread this around the world, and I have the full help and support of the divine behind me with this, and it's incredible to watch how this is spreading now, that I've only had the essence for less than 3 weeks, and people are talking about it. Now, I have reached out to professionals as well, and I do want to say that the professionals all think I'm Looney Tunes. And you know what? I can understand that. I see where they're coming from. These people say, I've worked with autistic kids for 30 years, and there's no scientific basis for anything that you're talking about. You're just full of baloney. I shared that with some of my families that I'm working with, and they said the most wonderful thing to me. They said, Brad, don't worry about it. Don't take that personally, because you're not the one that's going to convince the world about autism. it's going to be us, the families, that do that. And I thought about that, and another crying moment. It just warmed my heart and made me realize how powerful this is going to be. I mean, I've been told that this is going to be, the divine has told me that this is going to be a worldwide change of a, societal change in the way that we look at autism, and it's also been used for ADHD and ADD problems as well. And because it has that grounding effect, and it is working with those kids. And it's a marvelous journey that I'm embarking on here, to think that I can be the messenger of the divine, that there's so much trust there that I can get this message out, is, oh my gosh, so humbling, number one. And then, but number two is, I'm seeing it work. I've sat down with these autistic kids before I had the essence. And there's one little girl named Emily. She's 7. I brought a bunch of crystals to her, clear quartz crystals and amethyst. And she was like, wow. And she had never had the opportunity to play with crystals. And I said, are any of them talking to you? And she said, yeah. And she's, her eyes are big, and she's looking me right in the eyes, and she's being very verbal. And her parents are just watching this. And so I gave her one of the quartz ones and one of the amethysts, and I gave her a Lemurian quartz crystal as well. And, she was playing with these things, and then we were talking about her friends. And so I was confiding in her, like, oh yeah, the parents don't know what we're talking about, but I know that you know what I'm talking about, and you know that I know, and it was a wonderful experience. About a week later, and I want to share this with you, James, because I've never had this happen to me in a journey ever. And we're talking thousands of journeys. I called her mother, and I said, how's Emily? And she said, oh, she's sick. And I said, oh, no, what's wrong? And they go to a holistic doctor, and he found a spot on her right lung of pneumonia. And I said, would you please ask Emily if it's okay if I send her a little healing energy? I do not like to work on anyone under 16, but I made an exception to that because spiritually Emily is much older than her physical age, and getting her permission and her mother's permission, I thought would be adequate. So Emily immediately was like, of course he can work on me. And her mother said, yeah, absolutely. So when I got off the phone, I put on my blindfold, my headphones, and I did a journey. And when I go to the lower world, I go out my back door into the woods, and I walk out to a huge rock, which is about the size of a garage. And then I make a 90-degree turn and go down a hill to my tree where my elevator is. Well, I'm just walking through the woods. I get to the rock. I turn the corner of the rock, and Emily is standing there. And I was totally taken by surprise. And I said, Emily, what are you doing here? And she said, oh, I wanted to see what you were doing. I wanted to come along. I said, well, great, let's go. And so we walked to my tree, got in the elevator, went down to the lower world. Shadow was waiting for us. Shadow didn't scare her. Shadow, I can't tell you what Shadow is, but I can say that Shadow is a very large feline. Shadow loved her to death, and she was petting Shadow. And I said, okay, you ready to go do some work? She said, yep. I said, okay, Shadow, let's go to Emily's spirit body. We went to her spirit body. I saw the spot. I removed it, did a little bit of extra work. And then we returned. And when we left the lower world, came back to the middle world, we got to the Rock, and Emily said, "Okay, I'm going to go home now." And I said, "All right, well, thank you for coming." And I gave her a big hug, and she left. And I immediately emailed her mother, and I said, "You're not going to believe this." And her mother emailed me back and said, "This is incredible. Emily has been just lying on her bed staring at the ceiling for the last half hour while you were journeying with her." And when she found out that I was going to do this work, she had no problem at all finding me, because she knows how to find people in the fifth dimension. So she found my vibration, and she just wanted to tag along and see what I was doing. And that was absolutely normal for her. And I have never, ever had a client in one of my journeys like that before. So that was a very big aha moment for me, too, knowing how easily these kids float back and forth between worlds. They are precious cargo indeed. We can learn so much from them. And I know it's going to be a long, hard road, but I'm absolutely up for it. And again, it's going to be the families that cause the actual societal change in beliefs about autism. But, every single one of these parents that I'm working with right now, including ones who did not believe at all when I first told them, when they saw the change in their child, when they used the essence, they were fully on board. And they are going to be the ones who hit the streets and get us to change our thoughts on autism. And I think most importantly is get those kids off the damn drugs. All those pharmaceuticals that they give these kids to try to make them, quote, normal, unquote, like us. Well, they're not like us, and they don't want to be like us. And frankly, I want to be like them. They are so special, and they're here to help with the ascension to the fifth dimension, and they are just here to teach us. And once the world wakes up and realizes that, we're going to be a much better place as a result.
Yeah, that the fact that she could find you so easily with no training, she just does it naturally. That speaks volumes about her ability and their ability to work and interact on that plane. That's testimony in and of itself.
Yeah, 7 years old. I mean, wow.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so shoot me a link to the farms place you were talking about with these essences.
I will.
I'll get that up there, and we'll throw links to your. Do you want them to your Amazon books, or do you want them to the links to go to your website? We'll obviously have a link to your website, but which one would you prefer?
Well, if you have a link to the website, then they'll be able to see the store on the website. But if we could also put one up to the Amazon books, that would be great. If they want to download an ebook, it's a little cheaper and save them some money. That would be wonderful.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll definitely hook you up at that.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, man, we've covered so much.
Yeah, man, it was a very engaging conversation.
We could keep going for a few hours if you want.
I would love to. I got to stop and get dinner here in a little bit. Yeah, this is this reminds me so much of Keith, our early podcast with Stephen Davis.
Yeah, it really
does. Talking about holographic theory. We could just talk about this stuff for hours. It sounds like we probably need to at some point get you on here again and figure out where we want to recenter and pick up and talk about stuff. And I'll shoot you a link to the podcast so you can put it on your website if you want. And it's going to take me a couple of days to get this bad boy edited and cleaned up. But when I do, I'll shoot you a link to it.
Thank you. Yeah, because we haven't even discussed star beings or anything like that yet.
Yeah, there's so much territory we can touch on. Yeah, we'll look at the schedule and get you rescheduled to come back on. I think our listeners are really, really going to dig this. You're a very engaging speaker. It's easy to talk to you, and you're very approachable. So that's important to folks.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a wonderful experience, and I really enjoyed talking to both of you.
Yeah, I think at some point in the probably not too distant future, I see you, me, and Keith sitting on the back porch having a long conversation.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yes. Yep, I'm way overdue for a Houston visit, so yeah, we'll get that together for sure.
We'll introduce you to the Mucky Duck down here. It's our favorite little dive bar hangout. It's awesome.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview as much as we enjoyed sitting down and talking to Brad for 3 hours. Man, that was just such an awesome conversation. Again, we want to thank him for his time, and his effort and sharing his knowledge. That's always an awesome thing to run into. Check out our sponsor, bluerosealchemy.com. Plenty of info up there if you're into Ormus or stone medicine or anything like that. Do not forget to check out the show notes, because we have links to Brad's books and his website and the flower essence place he was talking about. Got all that stuff in the show notes. Definitely check it out. And lastly, if you know, or somebody you know knows somebody who we should talk to, who we should have on the show, please feel free to email us, drop us a line. We love getting letters and messages from you guys. We always respond to them. Really dig that stuff. Let us know, even if it's just shooting us a link to somebody that's really cool. You never know who would make a really good interview. So the website, for those of you who don't know, is higherconsciousnessradio.com. Drop us a line, let us know, and yeah, look forward to having Brad on again. Thanks, guys. Thanks for sticking with us. Bye.